The air in the makeshift hospital tent was thick with the stench of blood and antiseptic, a grim perfume that clung to Eleonora's clothes and hair. Outside, the relentless Texan sun beat down on the parched earth, but inside, shadows danced and flickered, cast by the single oil lamp that illuminated the rows of wounded men. Eleonora, or Nora as she was known to the soldiers, moved with a practiced grace, her slender frame a stark contrast to the brutal reality that surrounded her. She was a daughter of Boston, raised on abolitionist ideals, and the belief in a just and righteous world. This war, this bloody schism, was a crucible, and she was determined to emerge from it with her principles intact. It was on the third day after the Battle of Glorieta Pass that she found him. He was tucked away in a dark corner, his gray uniform caked with mud and blood, a stark and unwelcome sight in this sea of Union blue. He was young, no older than herself, with a shock of dark hair plastered to his forehead and a face that, even in unconsciousness, held a certain aristocratic grace. A Confederate officer, the enemy. A wave of cold fury washed over Nora, a visceral reaction to the uniform that represented everything she despised. Her first instinct was to turn away, to leave him to his fate. He was a traitor, a man who fought to preserve the vile institution of slavery. But then, a soft moan escaped his lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain that cut through Nora's anger and pierced her heart. He was just a boy who was suffering, a boy who was far from home. In that moment, he was not a Confederate, not an enemy, but simply a human being in desperate need of help. With a sigh of resignation, Nora knelt beside him. Her fingers, nimble and sure, went to work, cutting away the tattered fabric of his uniform to reveal a nasty gash on his shoulder, deep and inflamed. As she cleaned the wound, her touch was gentle, her movements efficient. She worked in silence, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She was a healer, sworn to help all those in need. But this felt like a betrayal, a compromise of her most deeply held convictions. It was then that she saw it, a small leather-bound book, tucked into the inside pocket of his jacket. Her curiosity piqued, she carefully removed it, her fingers brushing against the soft, worn leather. It was a book of poetry, the pages filled with the elegant script of a well-educated hand. Tucked between the pages was a letter, half-finished, addressed to a dearest sister. "The futility of this war weighs heavily on my soul," he had written. "We are brothers, fighting brothers, and for what? A cause that I can no longer reconcile with my conscience." The words were a revelation, a crack in the monolithic image of the enemy that Nora had so carefully constructed in her mind. This man, this Confederate officer, was not a monster, but a man of conscience. A man who was just as lost and confused as she was. A flicker of his eyelids, a soft groan, and then, his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were open, staring up at her with a mixture of confusion and alarm. Who are you?" he rasped, his voice weak and hoarse. "You're in a Union Field hospital," Nora replied, her voice soft but firm. "You're a prisoner." His eyes narrowed, a spark of defiance igniting in their depths. "I am Captain Alistair Beaumont of the Confederate States Army," he said, his voice gaining strength, "and I demand to be treated with the respect due to my rank." Nora met his gaze, her own eyes flashing with a fire of their own. "Here, you are not a captain, you are a patient," she said, her voice sharp, "and you will be treated as such." A tense silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of cannon fire. They were enemies, on opposite sides of a brutal and unforgiving war. Yet, in that small, dimly lit tent, they were just a man and a woman, two souls caught in the maelstrom of history. A silent understanding passed between them, a recognition of their shared humanity, a flicker of a connection that transcended the boundaries of their uniforms. The flap of the tent was suddenly thrown open, and a burly red-faced surgeon entered, his eyes scanning the rows of wounded men. "Nurse Maeve," he boomed, his voice a harsh and unwelcome intrusion. "What is the status of this rebel?" Nora's heart leaped into her throat. She had to think fast, to protect this man, this enemy, who was no longer an enemy. "He is stable, doctor," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Just another soldier, a long way from home." The surgeon grunted, his eyes lingering on Alistair for a moment before moving on. Nora let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding, her eyes meeting Alistair's once more. The war raged on outside, but in that small, quiet corner of the tent, something new, something fragile and unexpected, had just begun.